The dollar is almost 100 years holds the throne as a world currency, but apparently over his domination of the dark clouds. And the blow comes from where it was definitely not expected. From the closest ally. Europe. The head of the European Central Bank said the euro ready to apply for a new role. The role of the global currency. Why now? Because the world is changing. Because the US itself undermines confidence in the dollar. The Trump administration has imposed tariffs even against allies. Europe, Canada, Japan. Trump said that the United States is not obliged to protect NATO countries, and Europe should pay for its own security. The last straw was Trump's statement that the European Union was created in order to rob the United States. And the Europeans allegedly succeeded in this. Europe has drawn conclusions and is now acting on the basis of the obvious. It is no longer safe to rely on the US and the dollar. That is why it begins to build its system of protection and influence, which consists of 4 points. The first one. Strengthening the defense capability. Second. The development of the digital euro. Third. Improving the system of cross-border payments. And finally, the fourth and most important thing, especially for euro liquidity around the world, create swap lines with other countries. Just as the US Federal Reserve is doing with the US dollar now. As a result, Europe is ready to become an independent center of power. Financial, economic, and political. In this video, I want to translate and analyze the speech of the head of the European Central Bank, which, frankly, shocked me. I never thought that I would hear this from one of the architects of the European financial system. Given that Europe and the United States are like allies. The global situation is changing, and against this background, the euro gets a chance to play a more important role in the international arena. Moreover, the euro is already used in world trade almost as often as the US dollar. But the euro will not gain global influence just like that. We have to earn it. Now a serious turn is taking place in Europe. The authorities are beginning to restore hard power, both at the level of individual countries like Germany and at the level of the entire European Union. And we must clearly understand that the implementation of these efforts is the necessary conditions for the euro to become a truly global currency. Europe's economy is closely intertwined with the global trading system. Exports account for almost 20% of the total value added, which is 30 million jobs across the European Union. Any changes in the international order that lead to a decrease in world trade or to the division of the world into economic blocs will be harmful to our economy. Sad. Yes. But, on the other hand, there is a chance hidden in these changes. If done right, this could be the moment when the euro really gets a new role in the world. How are things today? At the moment, the euro is the second most important currency in the world. It accounts for about 20% of the world's foreign exchange reserves. For comparison, the dollar has 58%. That is, 20% of the euro. 58% dollar. But if you strengthen the role of the euro in the world, it will give you a lot of advantages. Let me list 3 such advantages. First, it will allow you governments and companies to borrow at lower rates, which will help stimulate domestic demand in an environment where external demand is becoming less predictable. Secondly, it will protect us from currency fluctuations. The more trading goes in euros, the less risk there is from currency storms and sharp capital outflows. Thirdly, it will protect Europe from sanctions or other external pressure. In other words, Europe will be able to better control its fate. This is what Valéry Giscard of d'Estaing 60 years ago called exorbitant privilege. That's exactly what he said about the US dollar. So how to achieve the leadership of the euro in the world? History shows that this is far from guaranteed. The euro will not get an impact automatically. We have to earn it. And we need to rely on 3 foundations, each of which is critically important for success. The first one. Europe should be not just a trading partner, but a strong and reliable player in global politics. We must maintain a firm commitment to open trade and reinforce it with defensive capabilities. The second foundation is economic. The European Union should become a magnet for global capital, so that both private and public players want to invest in the euro. And this requires deep, liquid, reliable markets that you can rely on. The third foundation is legal stability, the rule of law, political unity, and resistance to external pressure. Before I delve into each of these three foundations, I would like briefly to return to recent history and see what it can teach us. Because the global monetary system has already experienced similar shifts. There have been cases when the dominant currency of the world has put its leadership under a question mark because of the decisions of its issuer. But that didn't always mean she disappeared altogether. Let me give you three examples. In the mid-1920s, the US dollar supplanted the pound sterling and became the main reserve currency of the world. And by 1931, its share in the world's reserves had reached 64%. But this leadership did not prevent the United States from taking unilateral measures that changed the international monetary order. And I'm not talking about 1944, not the Bretton Woods system, I'm talking about 1933. When President Roosevelt suspended the conversion of the dollar into gold to fight deflation during the Great Depression. He rejected the demands of European countries for fixed exchange rates, saying, quote, "A healthy internal economic system of a nation is a more important factor for its well-being than the price of its currency." Fast forward to the early 70s. Then President Nixon put an end to the Bretton Woods system. He suddenly canceled the possibility of exchanging dollars for gold and imposed a 10% import tax. At that time, the United States was facing a growing foreign trade deficit, while Western Europe and Japan, on the contrary, had surpluses. Finance Minister John Connolly, who remembered the phrase "the dollar is our currency, but your problem," also said this: "Friendship, mutual assistance, and opportunities can no longer serve as an excuse for the US to continue to bear such a heavy share of the overall costs." In both cases, and in the 33rd and in the 70s, the status of the dollar as the world's main reserve currency has noticeably shaken. In the 30s, it dropped from 64% to about 20% in just a few years. In the 70s, from about 70% to 50% within a couple of decades. But in both cases, there was no strong alternative currency that could quickly replace the dollar. In the 30s, the British pound has already lost his position, and in the 70s, the German mark and the Japanese yen were too small in scale to global markets. So what did the investors do? They simply had no other way out, they went into gold. Because of this, the proportion of gold in the world's foreign exchange reserves grew up in the 30s by about 20%. And in the 70s, almost doubled to 60%. Today, it seems to me, the situation is a little different compared to the past. The dollar has a real competitor. This is the euro, the second most important world currency. Although yes, some of you may doubt, looking at the price of gold. The price of gold says that we have not yet convinced investors, which means we have a lot of work to do. Now we are finalizing work on a potential digital euro and launching projects to improve cross-border payments in it. This should simplify international settlements in the future. And we understand that we need to act quickly. We are also expanding with VOP lines and repo lines for key partners, thereby preventing a possible shortage of euros abroad. This should ensure a smooth transmission of our monetary policy and expand the use of the euro outside the European Union. Such measures will stimulate our partners to use the euro more actively in international settlements. But any currency has its own growth limit if it relies only on open trading. Today, the share of the euro in international export accounts is almost equal to the US dollar. But the gap in the status of the reserve currency still persists. Why? Probably the fact that investors, especially the state, not only benefits, but also geopolitical security. They invest money in the assets of those regions that are considered reliable security partners and capable of fulfilling allied obligations backed by real military force. In other words, a reliable geopolitical base should be based not only on the economy, but also on strong military alliances. This dual source of power, trade, security, and military power, explains the dominance of the dollar. The dollar is not just a reflection of the economic power of the United States, but also the result of serious security guarantees that the country provides to its partners. These guarantees strengthen trade ties and, according to research, can increase the share of the currency in world reserves by almost 30%. There is a lot of research and literature on this topic. What do we see today? A serious turnaround is taking place in Europe. The efforts are aimed at restoring its own military power. Initiatives are actively underway both at the level of individual countries, for example, Germany, and at the level of the entire European Union. It is only important if these efforts are successfully implemented that the euro can become a truly global currency. Conclusion, friends. The world is changing rapidly, and the global financial system, of course, is no exception. Europe, it would seem, has always been a reliable ally of the United States, but today, it is ready to fight for its place under the sun, both militarily and financially. The euro can become an alternative to the dollar, and this has not happened in the past. Unlike in previous cases, when only gold was an alternative, this time the euro can become an alternative to the dollar. But this requires not only the economy, but also strength, unity, and political will. Moreover, it should be noted that it will be a digital euro.